Thank you, LJ, and good afternoon. And Alan, I too would like to add my welcome to you, to Charlotte, and looking forward to your comments. I've been asked to introduce our Senator Hagan, Kay Hagan, but after watching her work this room, I think I need to recast my charge and present her instead of introduce her. But I think we're all honored and very fortunate to live in a state where we have a senator that is a champion for families. She's a champion for our military and our veterans. She's a champion for sound fiscal policy. She's a champion for quality education. And dear to my heart, she's a champion for job-creating economic development. Please join me in welcoming to the podium our Senator, the Honorable Kay Hagan.
Thank you, Ronnie, very, very much. And I will get a bite to eat when Alan starts speaking. But it is such a pleasure and honor to be here. And I really do enjoy the opportunity that we're here today, and that is to hear Alan Krueger give us some pearls of wisdom. And I do want y'all to know that Dr. Krueger was confirmed on his appointment on November the 3rd. And this is his first speech since he has been named as the chairman of the President's Council as the economic advisor. And it is really an honor that Alan is here today in the Queen City, and I am just delighted that we have an opportunity to hear him. And I want to give you just a little bit of background about him. First of all, when he was confirmed on November the 3rd, that took place in 58 days. Now, there's not a lot of things that happen that quickly in Washington these days. So I think that's a true testament of his expertise and advice. And when you Google him, some of the first images that you will see are right next to photos of him lecturing at Princeton. There's also, and then his official headshot, and then there's also pictures of him dressed in his gym clothes playing tennis. There's Dr. Krueger serving. There's Dr. Krueger with Billie Jean King. And that's all very impressive. And while I cannot vouch for the quality of Dr. Krueger's tennis skills, I can with great certainty tell you that we are joined today by one of the greatest economic minds of our generation. He's a graduate of Cornell and Harvard, and he's a professor of labor economics at Princeton. Dr. Krueger devoted his life to the issues that matter most to America's workforce. He did serve as the chief economist for two frontline cabinet departments in two different administrations. He was at the Department of Labor during the Clinton administration and as the assistant secretary for economic policy at the Treasury Department for the Obama administration. He's also received some of the most prestigious honors that are bestowed in economics, including a Sloan Fellowship and an NBER, the Olin Fellowship, and the Eisner Prize in Labor Economics. And I just, personally, I don't know all of those titles, but I do know that there's the cream of the crop in the sphere of economics. And he's also been a member of the executive committee for the American Economic Association and the International Economic Association. And he served for 6 years as the chief economist for the National Council on Economic Education, which is an issue that has certainly been a top priority of mine. And his work on unemployment, the economics of education, income distribution, terrorism, and regulation has been published widely by Dr. Krueger. He's an author of an interesting article that I wanted to give you the title of, What Makes a Terrorist? Economics and the Roots of Terrorism. And then in Education Matters, the selections of different essays on education. He's also coined a phrase, rockonomics, the economic issues and trends of the rock music concert industry. And during a time of heated partisan rhetoric and minimal bipartisan cooperation, it is impressive that he has been confirmed not once, but twice. in the United States Senate. And of course, I just told you about the 58 days, and evidently his first confirmation appointment took place in 59 days. So I think we are truly fortunate to have him in his position. We certainly welcome him today to one of the most vibrant cities in the nation, with an economy that continues to become more dynamic and more diverse and more prepared to lead in the 21st century. Charlotte has established itself as a leader across a wide array of industries, from clean energy to defense, and from banking to our newest sector, bananas, which we're thrilled to have Chiquita Brands have Charlotte as its world headquarters. But our innovative small businesses continue to serve as the economic backbone of our communities. And business leaders tell me all the time how much they respect and the work ethic and the dedication of our North Carolina workforce. I hear that all the time in Washington. But despite our many strengths, much work remains to be done, as we all know, across our country to shepherd our economy to a place that can generate sustained job growth and expansion. And in this time of economic uncertainty, our country is fortunate to have as head of the Council of Economic Advisors not only a top-notch economist, but a top-notch leader. And ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome to North Carolina the chairman of the President's Council on Economic Advisors, Dr. Alan Krueger.
Thank you so much. As Senator Hagan mentioned, this is my first official trip outside of Washington, and we thought this was a good time for me to come because we thought business would be settled in Washington and the weather would be nicer here. It's really wonderful for me to see such a big turnout on a rainy day. I think it says volumes about the commitment of people in the city of Charlotte to important world affairs issues. I'm particularly pleased to see Congressman Mel Watt here, who in the past we've worked together, he may not remember, on issues about infrastructure and part of the Recovery Act, trying to improve infrastructure in Charlotte and elsewhere. And I'm delighted to see so many of the political, civic, and business leaders of Charlotte here. And thank you so much, Senator Hagan, for your kind introduction. I especially appreciate that you mentioned my research, the work on rockonomics, and my enthusiasm for tennis. I wish my skill was matched by my enthusiasm. I have enjoyed and benefited from meeting with you up at the U.S. Senate before my confirmation hearing. And I appreciated the insights that you gave me about the economy here in North Carolina. I also want to thank you for all of the hard work that you do representing the state of North Carolina in the U.S. Senate. As everyone knows, the work that Congress does is not always predictable. One needs to look no further than the current debate over extending the 2% payroll tax cut and emergency unemployment benefits. President Obama proposed extending the payroll tax cut and extending and reforming unemployment benefits for another year when he proposed the American Jobs Act back in September. Nationwide, 160 million workers have benefited from the payroll tax cut this year, with a typical family receiving about $1,000 in extra after-tax income as a result of the payroll tax cut. In North Carolina, almost 5 million workers have benefited from this tax cut. Economists from across the spectrum have said that continuing the payroll tax cut and extended unemployment benefits would provide a boost to economic growth and job creation in the coming year. And it was impressive to me when I looked through the list of my colleagues in the economics profession, what a broad spectrum they represented. These measures have helped the economy to expand over the past year, despite the headwinds that we faced from higher gasoline prices due to turmoil in the Middle East, supply shocks from the natural disasters in Asia and sovereign debt issues in parts of Europe. Last week, the US Senate voted overwhelmingly to extend the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits for 2 months in order to give Congress enough time to develop a plan to expand them for all of next year, so that working Americans would have the certainty that they would not face a tax increase starting with their very first paycheck in January. Many economists, and there was actually an article in the newspapers today about this, many economists have boosted their forecasts about economic growth for the coming year on the assumption that the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits would be extended. However, the extension of the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits now faces an uncertain future in the House of Representatives. Forecasting the economy is hard, in part because it is hard to forecast whether Congress will continue the policies that are helping the economy to recover from the deepest recession in the post-war period. There is no doubt that we live in uncertain times. But you should be aware that we always live in uncertain times. One of the collective illusions that led to the economic crisis that began in 2007 was the mistaken belief that we had tamed economic uncertainty and financial volatility. Many were lulled into believing that risk and uncertainty were a thing of the past, like a quaint scene from a Frank Capra movie. But we rediscovered that random, unpredictable events are always possible. Now, economists have long recognized risk and uncertainty as an inherent feature of the economic landscape. Indeed, economists have identified varieties of uncertainty. The economist Frank Knight explained uncertainty by distinguishing it from risk. He referred to risk as being measurable, a known probability of an event occurring. An example is the chance of an accident occurring because a tire blows out on a truck in a fleet of trucks over the course of a year. With enough data and experience, we can calculate the chance of such risk. Uncertainty, by contrast, is immeasurable, an unknown chance of an extreme event occurring. We don't know what sets off fear and panic in financial markets, for example, so it is impossible to calculate the odds of this type of an event occurring. Knightian uncertainty has come up a lot more recently because it helps to understand financial crises. In times of uncertainty, true uncertainty, as opposed to known risk, investors panic, realizing that their models are no longer applicable, and they often run to safety. We saw that at the height of the financial crisis. One of the key advances of modern economies is that we can use the tools of economics to reduce the consequences of both risk and uncertainty. These tools, as I'll explain, include insurance and portfolio diversification. For example, having home or car insurance reduces the cost to us if a hurricane knocks a tree down on our front porch or car, which happened to me just a few months ago. It was a tree on my car, actually, in a way, fortunately, on my kid's car. Diversifying one's investments can reduce the consequences of financial shocks as well. We saw in the Enron debacle that far too many workers were insufficiently diversified, that their job security and financial security were needlessly bound up because they had invested their 401ks in Enron stock. When Enron went bust, not only did they lose their jobs, but they also lost their retirement savings. Social insurance programs like Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment insurance provide another essential layer of protection against risk and uncertainty, as do regulatory agencies. The FDIC, for example, was established in the darkest hours of the Great Depression to reduce the consequences of bank runs and give investors confidence. By providing insurance in the event that a bank was believed to be failing, depositors did not need to run for the exits when uncertainty increased. The FDIC also limits bank failures through prudential regulation. For nearly 80 years, the FDIC has helped to stabilize our financial system and the economy. Smart regulation can help contain the effects of uncertainty. For example, the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 requires systemically important financial institutions to hold more capital. Capital provides a buffer against losses and therefore promotes stability when adverse shocks should occur. In fact, because our banks and other financial institutions were required to raise capital and improve their balance sheets over the last few years, they are currently in a stronger position to weather the heightened uncertainty that has arisen from sovereign debt problems in the Eurozone. While we live with uncertainty and try to contain its effects, it is also important to keep the effects of uncertainty in perspective. There are times when, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt warned, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I believe this is one of those times. A number of commentators have claimed that uncertainty is holding back the US economy. They often assert with great confidence that an outburst of regulations or regulatory uncertainty more generally are crushing job growth and hurting the economy. The evidence, however, suggests the opposite. According to analysis by Bloomberg, there were more new regulations issued in the first 33 months of George W. Bush's administration than in the first 33 months of the Obama administration. Second piece of evidence to bear in mind: if regulatory uncertainty was hurting companies, why would corporate profits be at record levels? Another point which a former advisor to President Reagan recently noted in the New York Times is that companies themselves rarely cite regulatory burdens as an explanation for layoffs. And finally, we should not forget that regulations that curb pollution or protect the safety and health of the American people are good for the economy, and they improve the quality of our life, even if they're not directly counted in our GDP statistics. Over the first 2 years of the Obama administration, the net benefits of regulation are estimated to have exceeded $35 billion. One of the dangers of exaggerating the effects of uncertainty is that it could paralyze action. The fact that we live in uncertain times should not prevent us from taking actions to build a better future. I was reminded of this point in a recent conversation I had with Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Bezos told me that everyone asks him, what's going to change? How is the future going to be different? That's an interesting question, he said. We could speculate about it all day long, and we might be right, we might be wrong. But he went on to say, no one asks him, what's going to stay the same? What's going to be the same over the next decade or so? When you think about what's going to stay the same, he emphasized, you can plan for it, and make the appropriate investments. The example he gave me is that he is confident that Amazon's customers will always want low prices, wide variety, and quick delivery. I remember he said, "It's impossible for me to envision a day when Amazon's customers will say, gee, that Amazon was great, but I wish they charged me more and were slower in delivering my goods." And Amazon, being aware of their customers' demands and what they're confident will remain stable, plans and invests to meet those demands, for example, by investing in fulfillment centers all around the country. I think this is an insightful way to think about running a company, and I think it provides a valuable lesson for thinking about the economy as a whole. What I'd like to do is use this lens, the lens of certainty, or what we can expect to be stable, to view the US economy. A great deal is going to change, we could be sure of that, but what will remain the same? I've been asking myself that question since I had this conversation with Bezos, and I came up with a list of 7 significant items that I think we can be relatively confident that we can count on for the US economy. And let me encourage you to think of some additional items that I could add to the next time I give this speech. So item number 1, first, the United States of America will continue to have a large free market economy that benefits from competition and easy entry of new competitors. This applies to both product markets and labor markets. Creative destruction, as Schumpeter called it, is a hallmark of the American economy. It raises productivity and makes us more competitive in the global marketplace. Competition causes companies to be responsive to their customers and to constantly innovate to stay ahead of the field. Competition also benefits workers by giving them opportunities to change jobs, which puts pressures on employers to try to retain them. One often overlooked benefit of having a large market is that it is easier to specialize and take advantage of scale economies. Given the size, wealth, and competitiveness of our markets, companies the world over will always have an incentive to develop new products and service the US economy. To paraphrase Frank Sinatra, if you can succeed here, you'll succeed everywhere. This gives our consumers, companies, and workers a big advantage. Second on my list, in spite of our manifest problems, we do have strong and stable legal and economic institutions that are capable of adapting with the times and circumstances. These institutions have enabled us to build the largest economy in the world, and they have become the model the world over. Now, there is no question that some of our financial regulatory institutions failed us during the housing bubble, and that we had large gaps in our financial regulatory system that allowed risks to build up in the shadow banking sector. But ask yourself this: which country would you rather trade places with? Which country does a better job than the US when it comes to having a strong, independent central bank or protecting bank depositors? Which country's legal system does a better job protecting property rights and enforcing contracts? Who strikes a better balance between protecting patents and promoting competition? Which country has a better nonpartisan arbiter of fiscal issues than the Congressional Budget Office in assessing the benefits and costs of proposed legislation? Or than the Joint Committee on Taxation when it comes to evaluating tax proposals? Faith in our fiscal, economic, and financial institutions is a key reason why the US is a safe haven when uncertainty increases anywhere in the world. The dollar is the world's reserve currency because of the strength of our economic system and institutions. I think we can be confident that the U.S. will continue to play this role in the foreseeable future. Third, we are a diverse country and we have a diversified economy. High school textbooks will tell you that the U.S. economy moved from being agrarian and resource-based in the 1800s to being industrial in the first half of the 1900s, and then to being service-oriented later in the 1900s, and then idea-oriented in the 2000s. But the truth is, we are all of those things. No major industry in the United States contributes more than 15% to our gross domestic product. Our diversified economy is supported by a diverse workforce, which is diverse in terms of their skills, training, and demographics. We are a nation of immigrants. Although the process has not always been easy or uncontroversial, over our history, we have learned to welcome and incorporate immigrants and diverse populations. As a consequence, we are a diverse nation ethnically, racially, and culturally. No country attracts more talented or ambitious immigrants than the United States. Immigrants contribute significantly to our economy. For example, immigrants start new businesses and file for patents at higher rates than US-born citizens. Our diversity is a strength, and we will continue to be a magnet for talented people the world over and a nation that tolerates and welcomes diversity. The President is deeply committed to building a 21st century immigration system that honors our rich traditions and strengthens our economy. Fourth, education will continue to be the most sure path to success in the US and around the world, and the US will continue to have the best system of higher education in the world. According to the Times Higher Education of London, which keeps track of these things, 30 of the world's top 50 universities are located in the United States, and 2 of them are right here in North Carolina. I should mention that North Carolina also boasts 2 basketball teams in the top 10 right now. And I heard that Davidson defeated Kansas earlier in the week. This is not a year for me to boast about Princeton basketball, I'm afraid. U.S. universities attract hundreds of thousands of international students each year because there is no better place to come and study. Nearly 20% of all students worldwide who go abroad for their higher education enroll in a school in the United States. That exceeds the combined total of the next 2 most popular destinations, the United Kingdom and Australia. Research has found that most of the highest ranked universities in the US are over 100 years old. It takes time to build a great system of higher education. Universities and colleges are centers of research and innovation, but they are also places where students learn critical thinking skills that help them succeed in the knowledge economy. And I want to emphasize, it is not only our 4-year colleges and postgraduate universities that form the backbone of our system of higher education. Our system of community colleges is also a great strength. This unique system provides access to all who want to pursue higher education. More than 35% of first-time college freshmen enroll at a community college. Research has found that students who complete a year of credit at a community college increase their subsequent earnings by 5 to 8%, which is about the same as the earnings gain associated with completing a year of credit from a 4-year college. Our community college system is evidence that there are many avenues to success in higher education in the US, and I think also a strength when it comes to bridging post-secondary education and the world of work, because community colleges are very active in trying to understand the needs of employers and trying to train students for the jobs of the future. Fifth, we have an entrepreneurial culture supported by a vibrant venture capital community. It should be no surprise that the MBA degree was invented in the United States, but it is a surprise that it took 40 years for the first schools in other countries to follow suit and start issuing MBA degrees. The US has always had the most daring entrepreneurs, and we have a market, education system, and culture that encourages entrepreneurship. Examples of some storied US entrepreneurs include Steve Jobs, Jerry Yang, Jeff Bezos, Vera Wang, Warren Buffett, Howard Schultz, Walt Disney, Henry Ford, Ben Franklin, and Oprah Winfrey. And I could obviously go on all day long. It is startup entrepreneurs like these that drive a substantial part of job creation in the United States. Research by John Halterwanger and colleagues at the University of Maryland have found that startups are a key component of job growth. If you look back at 2005, which was a more normal year for the US economy, startup companies created 3.5 million jobs in the United States. That same year, overall job growth on net was 2.5 million. What that says is that if we didn't have startups, we would have lost about 1 million jobs. Now, the Obama administration has taken findings like these to heart and has created an initiative called Startup America that includes a number of policy initiatives aimed at accelerating high-growth entrepreneurship. These policies focus on improving the environment for high-growth entrepreneurs in 5 key areas. First, unlocking access to capital for high-growth companies. Second, connecting mentors to entrepreneurs. Third, reducing barriers and making government work for entrepreneurs. Fourth, accelerating innovation from lab to market for federally funded research and development. And fifth, unleashing market opportunities in industries like healthcare, clean tech, and learning technologies. We have an entrepreneurial culture in the US. If you think about it, we are a startup nation. The founding fathers were entrepreneurs who created a new nation. Entrepreneurship is in our DNA, and it will continue. Second, we innovate by figuring out new ways to make the things that we already have been making, but to do it using fewer resources and lower costs. This raises our productivity. Economists will tell you, ultimately, our living standards depend on both forms of innovation, process and product innovation. In America, we admire the great inventors of our times, and we marvel at their new technologies. This is a lesson I learned very early. I remember when I was in elementary school visiting Thomas Alva Edison's laboratory in New Jersey. I remember seeing all of the innovations that he was responsible for. In fact, I remember seeing his old-fashioned desk with papers still in it, thinking, we ought to take a look at the papers and see what else he had on his mind. Thomas Alva Edison was awarded 1,093 distinct patents during his lifetime. These included the light bulb, the electric motor, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, the full duplex telegraph, and the alkaline battery. I was thinking about how we marvel about innovations in the discussion I was having with Bob earlier about the nuclear industry and what lies ahead. But just think about all of Edison's contributions. Think about how those contributions supported the economy, created new and better jobs, and increased the quality of life both in the US and around the world. The electric motor reduced the burden of lifting and carrying heavy objects. and thereby helped all types of industries. With the light bulb and electricity, factories could run multiple shifts and produce more output for the world to consume using the same capital and equipment. The telegraph increased the speed at which people could send and receive information. The motion picture and phonograph made it possible for people to enjoy the leisure time that came from economic growth and greater productivity. Menlo Park, California, has become another locus of innovation in the century since Edison developed the phonograph in Menlo Park, New Jersey. But the lessons from Edison's laboratory still resonate. In New Jersey, legions of employees are working in entirely new industries that were established due to Edison's inventions. Moreover, Edison's cutting-edge inventions attracted and supported other related innovative activities. One thing that we have learned is that innovative activity often takes place in clusters. You have a fine example right here, the research triangle. In recognition of the spillover effects for the economy as a whole that accrue from clusters of innovative activity, the Obama administration requested funds for regional innovation clusters in our fiscal year 2011 budget. US companies invest more in research and development than do private companies in the next 3 countries combined. Our private businesses invest more in R&D than China, Japan, and Germany combined. This is a key ingredient to our economic growth. But economists have long recognized that the incentives provided by the private market to invest in innovation are insufficient. And this is reflected in our policies. The private market alone underprovides investment in innovation because the returns accrue to more people than just the private investors. Innovation is a public good. This is particularly the case for basic science. Government investments have been critical for spurring innovation and economic growth along with private sector investment. The US government invests a greater percentage of GDP in R&D than does the government in any other OECD country. Many products that we rely on are a direct result of federally funded research. Some prominent examples include the internet, which was the result, as you know, of DARPA research, the Global Positioning System, GPS, which LJ used to pick us up from the airport and drive us here, and sequencing of the human genome. President Obama has called for a ramp up in R&D to 3% of GDP when private and public investments are combined. That would be higher than it was during the space race. In addition, the president has taken steps to accelerate the commercialization or lab-to-market phase of development. And in September, President Obama signed the American Invents Act, which will provide more secure funding to the Patent and Trademark Office, reduce the backlog of patent applications, and improve patent quality. These steps, taken together with our strong educational system, with research clusters, and with our competitive marketplace, will ensure that the US is an innovative economy for years to come. In his speech in Osawatomie, Kansas, earlier this month, President Obama noted, and I'll quote here, quote, "The world is shifting to an innovative economy, and nobody does innovation better than America. No one has better colleges. Nobody has better universities. Nobody has a greater diversity of talent and ingenuity. No one's workers or entrepreneurs are more driven or more daring. The things that have always been our strengths match up perfectly with the demands of the moment." let me move to my last item on my list. We are a resourceful, result-oriented people with the capability to continually reinvent ourselves to pursue solutions to our problems. Winston Churchill reportedly said, "You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else." There are two ways to interpret this quote. One, which is probably what Churchill meant, is that the answers to our problems are clear from the outset, and we go down many paths before choosing the one that we should have started with at the beginning. The other interpretation, which I have to confess is my preferred interpretation, is that the solution to many of our problems may not be as clear-cut as people think they are at the outset. But our system leads us to try lots of things. We Americans experiment a lot. We are good at shaking off setbacks and being persistent as we strive to improve ourselves and our nation. We are pragmatic. Once we find something that works, we settle on it. If you think about this as a statistician, we are Bayesians in the sense that we learn from the past and try things until we get it right. Our optimistic sense that we can solve our problems by pursuing a pragmatic approach is an enduring characteristic of our startup nation. Let me conclude with some observations about the current economic situation. The U.S. economy has been expanding for 2.5 years, and we have had 21 straight months of private sector job growth. But the pace of economic growth and job creation is not fast enough given the deep hole that was created by the long recession that started at the end of 2007. The economic challenges that the U.S. faces are the direct result of problems that took years to build up and that came to a boil in the financial and economic crisis of 2007 to 2009. We are still recovering from that profound crisis and the problems that led to it. Because middle-class incomes failed to keep up with inflation, families borrowed to support their consumption and buy houses that later fell in value. Families are now paying down debt, which is restraining consumption and economic growth. Meanwhile, because we overbuilt houses, builders are reluctant to build new homes, and construction workers face a 13% unemployment rate. And the government budget, the federal government budget, moved from surplus and paying down debt at the end of the 1990s to deficit and exploding debt in the early 2000s because the priorities in Washington at that time shifted to increase spending to prosecute 2 wars while cutting taxes in a skewed and inefficient way. These are our main challenges, not uncertainty about economic policies, taxes, or regulations. To an economist, the solution to these problems is clear. We need to raise demand in the economy so that we are purchasing more goods and services in the short run. This would strengthen and sustain the economic recovery and put more people back to work. While at the same time, we need to pursue credible policies to return to a fiscally sustainable path in the intermediate and long term, and invest more in innovation, research, and infrastructure. President Obama has proposed exactly this. In September, he proposed to the Congress a balanced plan that would increase demand in the short term, such as by extending the payroll tax cut and extending unemployment benefits, while decreasing the deficit in the 10-year budget window. It is this type of balanced approach that is needed to build a path towards fiscal sustainability and sustained economic growth. Uncertainty cannot be an excuse for inaction. Even in an uncertain world, I have emphasized that there are considerable strengths that you can count on to continue in America. Chiefly, our large free market economy, our stable economic institutions, our culture, our entrepreneurial spirit, our skilled workforce, and our ingenuity. I firmly believe that there is no amount of uncertainty that we cannot conquer by relying on the durable strengths of what is certain in America. Thank you very much.
Second. On behalf of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, I want to thank Alan for coming today to make his comments to us and to remind us that, well, if you can come up with 3 more and have a top 10, we could probably get him on David Letterman.
I don't think he'd give me as much time.
But we certainly thank Alan for coming here to Charlotte and presenting us with his positive thoughts about the U.S. economy and reminding us that there are many strengths that we have in certainties in the U.S. market, and we certainly thank it. Now, we do have a few moments where we can take some question and answer questions from the audience. We have about 5 or 10 minutes at best. And I have a couple microphones that I'll have come over to you. If you please ask your question, please keep it to a short, concise question, not necessarily a statement, but a question, and Alan will try and address these. Our microphone is right here. Okay, this gentleman right here. Yes.
Why didn't or doesn't the president adopt and present the Bowles-Simpson plan to the Congress?
Mrs. Bowles just left. I noticed she left towards the end of my remarks, and I was delighted that she was here. I think the Bowles-Simpson Commission did outstanding work. The philosophy behind the Bowles-Simpson Commission of reducing tax expenditures, loopholes in the tax code is something which has been part of the President's budget submissions and certainly has influenced the administration's thinking. The idea of having a balanced approach between revenues and spending cuts, which was central in the Bowles and Simpson Commission, is also part of the administration's approach to trying to get control of our deficits and move to a sustainable path. So I think many of the ideas of the Bowles and Commission have indeed influenced the President's thinking.
We have a question over here. It's to the left, right.
You emphasized the importance of our outstanding colleges here in the United States, but you didn't cite our public schools as a strength, and I think there's a reason for that. I was wondering if your research indicates what is the value of giving an American a good high school education?
Thank you. As Senator Hagan mentioned, one of the areas I've done research in my former life as a professor was on the economics of education. And I think the literature is quite clear that education from K through 12 is extremely valuable. If you look at those who have a high school degree versus those who don't complete high school, we see those with a high school degree doing much better in the job market. They have higher wages and lower unemployment. Now, one might worry, this is the kind of thing that academic economists worry about, well, maybe those who finish high school are different than those who don't. In one of the studies I've done, and others have replicated this type of work, we look at compulsory schooling laws. Some states have compulsory schooling age at 15, some 16, some 17, some 18. And less so now than historically, but even now, those laws do affect some students. And if we look at students who completed more years of high school because they were compelled to by the compulsory schooling law, we actually find that they benefit when they enter the job market later on. So I do think that K through 12 education is extremely valuable. It's valuable for those who don't go on to post-secondary education. And it's an area where the administration has focused in trying to strengthen K through 12 education as well as preschool. I'll just highlight the Race to the Top initiative, which I believe North Carolina was one of the early recipients of, to try to encourage the states to pursue more innovative approaches, break through some of the bureaucracy which affects schools. I should also mention this is a topic which is personally important to me because my wife is a high school math teacher in New Jersey. And I think that it's extremely important with state and local government budgets extremely tight right now that we maintain a focus on K through 12 education. I know around the country we're seeing very high layoffs. It's a very difficult time for state and local governments because especially local governments rely on property tax revenue, and given what happened with the drop in home prices, tax revenues declined. But I think it's very short-sighted for us as a country if we cut back in our K through 12 education. The president proposed as part of the American Jobs Act a fund to help state and local governments retain more teachers and first responders. And he's said repeatedly that we're extremely short-sighted, harming our future at a time when the economy is valuing more skilled workers even more if we're cutting back on teachers in the classroom.
We have a question right here to the back, right? No, you sir, yeah.
How do we keep more dollars in the United States? 30 years ago here in Charlotte, it was commonly said that a dollar would circulate 8 times before it would leave the local economy. Now, a dollar circulates 1 or 2 times, and it goes to China, Saudi Arabia, Mexico City, for various reasons. How do we get it to circulate more here? Because if you circulate it 3 times and go up to 4, you magnify the economy quickly.
Well, it's certainly the case that we have a more globally integrated economy. If we just look at trade flows, exports and imports, or if you look at workers in the United States who have jobs in companies that are foreign companies and vice versa, the world economy has certainly become more integrated. I think what's absolutely critical is that the U.S. go back to doing what we have done historically so well, which is to build the products that the rest of the world wants. Our exports have been growing. I think we need to continue that. The president set a goal of doubling exports by 2014. We're actually on a path now to do that. One of the things I think that we're going to see more of in the future is the U.S. will be a leader in exporting services. Right now we have a trade surplus when it comes to services, and because of some of the changes in the technology that have been taking place and that I suspect will continue, it will be even more possible to export services in the future, and that's an area of strength for the United States. But more generally, I think we need to focus on maintaining our edge so that we're more competitive internationally.
I think we have time for just 2 more questions. One question back here to the back, my back right.
Two quick things. One is you mentioned regulation, and you mentioned how it's perhaps not stifling the economy currently, but the research which you spoke to just counted the numbers of regulation. And the point here is that one regulation, poorly construed, could dwarf 40 regulations, and so we really can't draw any conclusions around those kinds of things. The second thing I would say is, in bringing back to Washington, I would hope one thing that you'd bring back is that I do think for our debt and deficits, that for the long run, people that are doing well need to pay more. But I don't think that you get there with polarizing rhetoric. I think that over the past few years there's been...
Is there a question?
Well...
Do you have a question, please?
Sure. The question is, can you comment around the polarizing rhetoric and...
The figures that I cited were from Bloomberg News, If you look at what's called significant regulations, those that are estimated to have an impact on the economy of beyond $100 million, I think you would find that the Obama administration has fared fairly well, even by that metric. But I want to say a little bit more about regulation. I think what we need is smart regulation. Clearly, we saw what happens when we have inadequate regulation in the financial crisis. Look how much worse off the country is because our regulatory agencies failed us. What we need, I think, is an appropriate balance in this country where we properly assess the benefits and costs and the risk associated with various regulations. One thing that the president has done is, which I believe is unprecedented, to ask all of the agencies of the federal government to look back at regulations that have been put in place over the years and say, are they all necessary? And this has led to a process where some regulations have been reviewed and deemed unnecessary, and we can take steps to address that.
We have time for one last question.
Why did you call it a woman?
Okay.
Just
We'll
for
maintain
diversity.
diversity as one of your points. This young lady over here, please, to my left. Point number 4, diversity.
Talking about regulations, I want to ask is there going to be any change for the financial industry? Because we know the financial crisis was partially caused by the overheat of the financial industry. So, and that also prevents the talents to flow into probably like science and technology for that kind of innovation field. So is there gonna be some change in the next couple of years?
Well, as you know, landmark legislation was passed by the Congress, signed by President Obama, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. That creates, I think, a much-needed balance in the U.S. in terms of regulating the financial sector. The various agencies have been working very quickly to implement the components of Dodd-Frank. There are many components which would take a whole lunch to go through. But one institution I'll just mention called the Office of Financial Research was set up under Dodd-Frank. The Office of Financial Research is a response to the recognition that the regulators lack critical information leading up to the economic crisis. And Congress created a new office which has the ability to collect information on counterparty risks, on new products in the financial sector. It reports to the Financial Stability Oversight Council. And just last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, the president nominated Richard Berner to be the first director of the Office of Financial Research. So certainly steps are being taken to implement the components of the Dodd-Frank Act, and that process is working its way through. And there's been an emphasis on both doing it as quickly as possible, but doing it at as high a quality level as possible as well.
On behalf of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, I want to thank you, Alan, for coming here to Charlotte to present us your insights. And I think everybody here appreciates, as your first speech, choosing Charlotte. We certainly are very honored for you to be here.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting me.
Thank you.
Don't forget your pen.
I'll take it.